Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first episode in a series that I'm calling, if I can even speak right today. Welcome to the first episode in a series that I am calling Where We Are. Where we are right now. What I'm going to do in this series is I'm going to try to stop every time. Well, let me try to explain it this way. I see. Here's the first episode of Where Are We? Where we are, and I don't even know where we are. I don't even know where to begin. Let me explain it this way. All right? Let me explain it this way. Every day, I'll read news articles, I'll listen to the news, watch the news, listen to what's happening around me, and I'm always overwhelmed that there's just so much to talk about, right? I'm like, oh wait, that's going on. And I'll be like, well, I should try to do a program about this, and I should try to do a program about that, and I'm like, well, each program would be like an hour long. I can't cover everything. So I started thinking maybe if at least maybe once a week, maybe who knows how often, I'll just turn on the microphone and I'll be like, welcome everyone to our series, Where We Are. And we're just going to stop and look at where we are right now as a society, as the church, as the country, as a culture. Try to figure out where we are right now and then try to determine where we may be going. And I'm going to do this by bringing in all kinds of news clips, reading news articles, reading headlines, just trying to give you a sense of where we are. Okay, where are we right now? Trying to figure out where we are and then try to offer maybe at times some predictions of where we are going. I don't know exactly how this little series is going to be structured. I haven't got it all figured out, but I have this overwhelming sense that we need to stop and try to figure out where we are more so than ever. All right. We need to figure out where we are. That's what we need to do. We need to figure out where we are. And I think we need to try to figure out where we are going. And I believe this gives me the freedom to look at a number of things. Look at just not trying to go in depth to every issue, but just trying to say, hey, let's consider this and let's consider this. So welcome everyone to the first episode in a series that I am calling Where We Are. The goal of this series is to stop and to look at where we are so that we can figure out where we are going. And this first episode of Where We Are is coming to you live Friday, June the 19th, 2020 at 11:57 a.m. Central Time. There, I could have stated it that way from the very beginning, but I didn't want to state it that way from the very beginning because I wanted you to hear me struggle because that captures what this program is all about. I struggle every day looking at everything happening in the world going, man, where are we? Where are we headed? Every day I struggle like that. So I wanted you to hear me struggle trying to explain it so that you kind of get an idea of what I'm going to try to accomplish. I'm going to try to accomplish helping you as I try to help myself figure out exactly where we are. Where are we? Look, where are we? Have you ever been in a car? I used to joke. Now I know it's a little different now because of GPS, but back before everyone had, a GPS device in their vehicle and you had to use that old fashioned paper map. I can remember multiple times me and my wife traveling somewhere and I'm like, okay, you got it? She's like, good to go. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to sleep or I'm going to take a nap or whatever. I'm going to rest. And next thing you know, I open my eyes and I'm like, where are we? And she's like, don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? Why didn't you wake me up the minute you didn't realize you didn't know where we are? Okay. So, sometimes I'm a little overwhelmed trying to figure out where we are. So, I'm hoping that that we can accomplish something. All right. So we have a lot of things to talk about. So let's do this. Number one, a few days ago, I did a very disturbing program where I told you about the history of a game that was played at fairs, different parts of the country. This game occurred from like the 1880s to the 1950s, and it was called hit the N baby. It was a game where an African-American male or an African-American boy would put their head through a little opening, and then people would pay money to take a baseball or eggs and throw it at the African-American's head. It was a horrible, horrible game. I told you all about its history. I'm not going to go and repeat everything, but in my discussion of that, I kept seeing in some newspaper descriptions that there was another game called Wring the Neck of a Duck. And I was thinking, well, maybe if they view the African Americans as less than a human, and that leads back to a discussion of evolutionary thought, if they view them as less than a human and if they got a game where they're like wringing the neck of a duck and they're treating the duck the same way with this cruelty, then that would explain the mindset. But someone pointed out that most likely that wring the neck of the duck that's being described is not the wringing of an actual duck. It's a plastic duck, some kind of fake duck, and then you take a ring, R-I-N-G, and you toss it around the neck of the duck. So, and it's probably, they were like plastic ducks, probably sitting in water. And that's why it says in water. And then you would stand so far and take a little ring and throw it over the head. That's probably what it meant. I was trying to come up with a way to explain it, but most likely that wring the neck of the duck is not the actual wringing of the neck of an actual animal. I probably should have known that, but I guess what was happening is as I was reading these newspaper advertisements of this hit the N baby game, I could only imagine, well, it would take some really messed up people to do that. They would have to view this human being who's a different color as not being a human being. That's the only way they could ever do something that cruel. And if they've got a game where they're hurting an animal, well, then that would make sense. But most likely they treated ducks more humanely than they treated, sadly, African Americans at that time. So I just wanted to clarify that. I want to thanks to Diane for sending me an email, giving me that information. So that seems to be the more accurate description. I was really trying to come up with a justification to try to explain it, and I guess that doesn't even work. So I just wanted to clarify that and let you know because, well, where are we? Well, we need to make sure we are as clear as possible. All right, so let's begin this first episode. Where do we even begin? I don't even know. Let's start with a news clip, all right? Let's just play this, and I've talked about this in the past. I heard this yesterday, and I don't think it's getting enough attention that it deserves. So let's listen to this, and then I'll come back and throw in some comments.
Okay. Turkey has airlifted troops into northern Iraq for a cross-border ground operation against Turkey's against the Kurds. The defense minister in Ankara said the offensive was launched following intense artillery fire into the area. Now, there have also been attacks against Yazidis on Mount Sinjar. These are the folks that are still on the mountain. They were targeted for genocide. And now the Turks have been targeting them. They are aggressive. And I think a part of this is the distraction, the opening that it has provided for them with all that's happening, the coronavirus, what's happening here domestically. Join me now to talk more about this. Resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, Michael Rubin. He also testified recently before the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom on the needs for religious liberty in northeast Syria. Michael, welcome to Washington Watch.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tony.
Okay, what are the Turks doing? What's going on?
Well, there's two different operations here. Where they're crossing the border and putting in their ground troops is an area of rugged terrain which the PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party, which has led an insurgency in Turkey for the past 30-plus years, is based. And this is an operation which happens from time to time, although, of course, the Iraqis are unhappy about this because it's a violation of their sovereignty. And even though the Turks will label all Kurds and the PKK insurgent group as terrorists, it's not clear that the PKK has actually taken any action against Turkey recently. Turkey seems to be just continuing its long campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Kurds. But the real problem, and what's really troubling, is what the Turks are doing on Mount Sinjar. Now, it's important to understand, Tony, when we talk about Mount Sinjar, it's not a little mountain. It's a large mountain that is about 50 miles long. And so you drive along valleys on either side of it, and on the mountain itself is where all these Yazidis live, and some of them weathered the Islamic State, but many others are the refugees, the women, the girls who have been returning from Syria, liberated from the Islamic State. They're trying to get their life together, and it's not clear why the Turks are insisting on bombarding them. It really undercuts the development, and it raises questions about whether Turkey is waging counterterrorism, and it's clear they're not, or whether they're pursuing a religious agenda, an intolerant religious agenda.
Now, Michael, many of these Yazidis on Mount Sinjar are in basically refugee camps. I mean, they're still in the recovery process from, as you pointed out, what ISIS did, and so this is traumatizing to them. I mean, they have no idea. They're isolated. I mean, we have a NATO ally. Turkey is a NATO ally. Is NATO saying anything about this?
You know, NATO isn't. NATO is being disturbingly quiet. When I was in Sinjar last, several months ago, right before the coronavirus hit, it was important that we not be there at night because that's when the Turkish warplanes came. And it wasn't just a matter of rebuilding houses, Tony. It's a matter, this is an agricultural area. It's a matter of planting crops. And whenever the crops would grow, the Turks would bomb them and they would burn. So it is a deeply troubling scenario.
So, Michael, what should be the United States, we've got our hands full right now. I mean, the coronavirus, as you said, that stopped all travel. I mean, even the travels that Yusuf was taking, we've not gone anywhere. I came back from Sudan right as the outbreak was beginning. And so there's a bit of isolation taking place in terms of being able to go on the ground and see these things. But we're getting these news reports. What should our posture be here?
Well, Tony, we know from past precedent, from the time of, for example, when Pastor Brunson was held hostage inside Turkey, that if the U.S. government is willing to impose economic sanctions, eventually Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will back down. It's essential that we actually leverage economic pressure. The other thing to keep in mind is many of the Yazidi I talked with said they have proof of life of girls and women who were seized by the Islamic State who are still in areas under Turkish control. It's essential that those economic sanctions also compel the release of those Yazidi slaves. It's important to have religious freedom in the Middle East.
Absolutely, and especially as you testified on northeast Syria. Michael Rubin, one final question for you. What's the bigger agenda here for Turkey? Is this just, as you said, they occasionally make these raids into northern Iraq? Is there something bigger at play here?
There's two things. First of all, Turkey under Recep Tayyip Erdogan has talked about revising the borders it's had for the past 100 years, and that's upsetting all the neighboring states. But there's also a religious agenda at play. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, essentially comes from a Muslim Brotherhood background, and he's seeking to impose his religion and his Islamism not only on Turkey's Shiites and not only on Turkey's Christians, but also the Yazidis as well. And it's important to nip this process in the bud.
All right. Michael Rubin, thank you so much for joining us today. Very, very insightful.
Thank you.
Now, the reason I wanted you to hear that about trying to figure out, where are we right now? Where are we? Well, where are we is that there was discussion. There's always this time where something happens. The United States government comes up with a foreign policy, foreign national policy that usually ends up leaving the Kurds and different groups abandoned and not protected. And whenever that happens, some of us will go turn on our microphones and say, hey, the Kurds are being abandoned, or this group's being abandoned, this group's being abandoned, and this bad things are going to happen. And then guess what? The media moves on, and then we're left going, hey, remember what we said? And everybody's like, no, don't remember what you said, don't care what you said, because it didn't happen. You're like, no, it did happen, but nobody covered it. So once again, we have a situation where America made some definitely policy decisions, the United States government, the Trump administration, that was going to put a lot of people in some serious harm's way. And now it seems like maybe we have some ethnic cleansing going on and we have some things happening that's not good and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about what's happening there in Turkey. Nobody's talking about what's happening in some of those parts of Syria. It's part of the world that gets forgotten, especially during the time of COVID-19 and then all the situations happening domestically here in the United States of America. Americans don't care about what's happening in the rest of the world. But we need to pay attention to what's happening there. I don't know how to say this any clearer than this. So many times America says we don't care about what's happening in Afghanistan. We don't care about what's happening in Iraq. We don't care what's happening in Syria or in Turkey. And we say we don't care. And then 10 years later, 7 years later, boom, something happens. And then you're like, yeah, 5 years ago, that's when the problem started and no one paid attention. Hey, 4 years ago is when the ethnic cleansing started and now we're looking at mass genocide. Now we care. Well, it's too late to care then. So we need to pay attention and keep our ears and eyes open to news coming out of Syria, Turkey, any parts of that region, and be praying for the people there who are, in many cases, they're being targeted simply because of who they are. There's religious freedoms being denied. People are being killed. People are basically being enslaved. These are real world situations that are happening that are often overlooked. And I wanted to at least bring that to your attention. The group that he mentioned there, if you are not familiar with them, it is spelled YAZIDS, YAZIDS. That's YAZIDS. All right. So they're a group of people. They're indigenous to Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. All right. And so, I could talk a lot about the group, the Yazidis, but you definitely want to know about them and understand who they are. And, I know when you have a group of people being wiped out, it's important to at least know who these individuals are, because these are people created in the image of God, and we need to pay attention to that. So just make sure you understand that the earlier discussion about Turkey and America pulling troops out of here and not doing this and not doing that, and how this is going to lead to this group being slaughtered. And I know that then nothing happens or nothing appears to be happening, and nothing appears to be happening because nobody's talking about it anymore. Doesn't mean the situation just magically got better and improved. All right. So I wanted to at least bring that to your attention. And, we may return to that here in a second, because I got another news clip from that same program talking about some other issues. So let's see what they had to say about some other issues today.
From the heart of our nation's capital, here's Family Research Council President Tony Perkins.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Washington Watch. Coming up on this Thursday edition, looking to capitalize on the shock created by the Supreme Court's decision on Monday, which redefined the word sex beyond the biological reality of men and women. Senate Democrats today attempted to push through the deceptively named Equality Act. Thankfully, they were blocked by Senators Hawley, Langford, and Lee. All three went to the Senate floor. What does the bill do? What's its purpose? We'll talk about it in just a moment. Also, former Attorney General of the U.S., Senator Jeff Sessions, will be here to discuss why the Department of Justice, under his leadership, upheld the biological reality of men and women, and where the court's redefinition of the word sex may lead us as a nation. In more disturbing news out of Turkey, Dr. Aykan Erdemir, Senior Director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, is here later on Washington Watch on the rise of anti-Semitism in Turkey. And here's a question for you. Have you noticed a little bias in the media toward President Trump? Now, I ask that tongue-in-cheek. There's no question the media is biased. However, it's become blatant. The president is scheduled to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on Saturday for his first major rally since the coronavirus hit the U.S. In a story published earlier this week, the AP connected Trump's rally to an ugly chapter in Oklahoma history. on race that took place 100 years ago. We'll talk about how the media has become the opposition party in this country with John Daniel Davidson, political editor of The Federalist. The website, Tony Perkins.
So they mention a number of things there, and so I want to bring up a couple of things here. They mentioned Turkey, but they mentioned the Trump rally. All right, and I want you to really think about this in regards to the Trump rally, because this is very important. I believe there are two things, because the goal here is to figure out where we are and to figure out where we're going. And it's Friday, and Saturday is going to be here before we know it, and that's when the Trump rally is going to occur. And there are two things you need to be on the lookout for the Trump rally. Is this going to explode into some chaotic scene where there is massive protest and violence happening outside of the rally, people trying to get into the rally are hurt? Are protesters going to get inside of the rally? Is this going to become a flashpoint that's just going to be ugly? I don't know. I'm assuming there's going to be so much security and police presence, it's going to be insane. Who knows? I don't know if there's some move for all kinds of protesters to descend upon Tulsa and just turn that place into a mess. I don't know, but we need to be on the lookout for it. And number two, this is going to be big. The way Trump is going to approach this, I doubt. I mean, I could be wrong, but I believe when the cameras are turned on at that rally, there's going to be very few people wearing a mask. I can probably tell you there's going to be very few, because the whole wearing a mask for COVID-19 situation is becoming a political thing. And so to wear the mask, you're demonstrating that, you're buying into the conspiracy and the hype and you're a liberal and whatever. And if you don't wear the mask, you're demonstrating that that you are brave and that you're not going to fall for the media lies and the liberal propaganda and whatever. I have a feeling there'll be very few to none wearing a mask inside that arena. I don't know how many people are going to be there. Now, here's what we need to look for. The violence for the night of, and then a close monitoring of COVID-19 cases after the rally. If for some chance that rally happens and then the numbers just explode after that rally, Trump's going to be crucified in the media for it, and people can make all the excuses in the world. But if you hold a rally in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic and you basically are kind of downplaying everyone wearing a mask, and if no one wears a mask and you don't make everyone mandatory to everyone wear a mask, and even if people wear a mask, but nobody's going to be practicing social distancing, and if the numbers go through the roof, and if these are people coming from all different parts of the country and then they spread out all over the place and spread it, wow, you could possibly witness the end of Trump's presidency right there. You could possibly end. Now, here's what's going to happen. If the numbers spike, all the pro-Trump people are going to say the numbers are wrong and they're being manipulated and it's all fake news. So there's not going to be any reasoning with anyone, but those are the two things we're going to definitely want to watch. I'm glad they brought up the Trump rally. That's going to be an issue. There are already news articles all over the place in regards to this. In fact, let me show you. Like right now, if I go, let me see here. Let's see. Trump claims some Americans wear the mask to signal disapproval of him. So that's already telling everyone that if you're coming to the Trump rally, then don't wear a mask, because that's demonstrating that demonstrates that you're against President Trump. So that's already crazy. President is threatening the protesters ahead of rally. All right, that come on. President Trump, it's almost like he's begging for a fight. He's begging for a fight. Tulsa is imposing a curfew to prevent violence and concerns over racial tensions, right? Super spreader event. So, I mean, this rally on Saturday is going to be a big news story. You want to figure out where we are right now? Where we are is we are one day before this Trump rally, and those are going to be the two major stories to pay attention to. I'm telling you what's going to happen the day of, and then what happens as it relates to COVID-19 after 7 to 14 days after, if it can be directly linked back to that rally. And let's just say it spreads bad. Now, I'm not saying it will. I'm just saying if it does, it's going to be an issue. All right. In the midst of that, we have the Supreme Court and its decision that's still being discussed, and that's what they're getting ready to talk about. All right. I wanted to bring some of those issues up. All right. Let's go back.
Perkins.com. If you're on Twitter, it is @TPerkins. All right, let me just remind you, folks, we are coming up to the end of our budget year, and because of partners like many of you out there across the country who listen to Washington Watch, our program has continued to reach hundreds of thousands of Bible-believing Americans each and every day. Now, at a time when the media has never been more hostile to biblical values, we are here not only keeping you informed on what is really happening, but we're also giving voice to your values and upholding those values in Washington, D.C. So we've got some very generous supporters that have put forth a $1 million challenge. And so if you will partner with us, this will have the effect of doubling your gift, impacting and shaping the culture for Christ. You know, there's some disappointing things. I talked about it yesterday. This court decision that we're going to talk about in just a moment was discouraging. But we cannot yield up the territory that we've been given. We've been told to stand firm for truth. And so I challenge you to stand with us. We've got folks standing by to take your phone call. 800-225-4008. That's 800-225-4008. If you'd like to be a partner with us and make sure that Washington Watch continues to be heard on now almost 400 stations across the nation, call us 800-225-4008, or you can go to TonyPerkins.com and donate there as well. All right, with a majority of Americans distracted by the left's attempts to dismantle police departments across the country, or stunned by the court decision on Monday that turned science on its head, Senate Democrats attempted to fast-track Nancy Pelosi's deceptively named Equality Act. Fortunately, senators like Mike Lee, James Lankford, and Josh Hawley took a stand against the radical Equality Act. Joining me now with the details of all of this is Travis Weber, Vice President of Policy and Government Affairs here at the Family Research Council. Travis, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tony.
All right, I'm going to go here in just a moment. I've got a few clips from the three senators I mentioned that went to the floor earlier.
Now, so we've talked about Turkey, what's happening there. We need to pay attention to that. The Trump rally is coming on Saturday. We need to look for two things we're going to be paying attention to the violence that could explode on the day of, which is tomorrow, and then how this is going to possibly relate to COVID-19 and a spread that our people are concerned with, whether rightly so or wrongly so. Well, time will tell. But if 7 or 14 days, this rally proves to be a major spreader of COVID-19 and chaos, the numbers just start going crazy. Oh, man, you're talking about a major problem for Trump. So while all of that's going on, another thing to figure out where we are, where are we right now? The Equality Act. The Equality Act. You need to research the Equality Act. You need to know what's in it. If Biden wins, if Joe Biden becomes the next president of the United States of America, and I think you're going to ultimately at some point, and if the Democrats have a major victory in the general election, I think we may the Equality Act may actually ultimately get passed. And if it does, you need to know what's in it, and because that could tell you where we're going. All right, they're getting ready to talk a little bit about it, so pay close attention.
Here today, now two of those senators we've had on the program already this week discussing this, but a lot of folks were silent. But these three senators went to the Senate floor to talk about this. And first, I want to play this clip. We've got a clip of Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri talking about the Equality Act in this attempt to pass it through the process onto the Senate floor without actually having a hearing in the Senate on the bill. Here's a clip from Senator Hawley earlier today on the Senate floor.
But the effects of this bill, forcing taxpayers to pay for abortions, forcing doctors and nurses to perform abortions against their will, forcing faith-based hospitals and clinics to perform abortions. H.R. 5, this bill here, would supersede existing restrictions on abortion, including funding, including health and safety standards, and other regulations that the states have passed. It would force faith-based adoption agencies, some of which have been helping birth mothers find a safe and loving and permanent home for more than 100 years. It would force them out of business. It would coerce those who don't want to speak or who hold different beliefs into adopting this set of practices and principles and beliefs at work. These doctors, these nurses, these faith-based agencies. I submit to you that this is not the way to find consensus in America. This shunting aside of the constitutional rights of sincere, well-meaning people of faith is not the way to proceed. And this gutting of the Religious Freedom Act, and I say that because H.R. 5 explicitly carves out of the Religious Freedom Act, it explicitly carves out of its safety provisions all of those requirements I just mentioned. It rolls back the liberties afforded to people of faith.
Travis Weber, H.R. 5, the Equality Act, put forth by Nancy Pelosi, one of her top priorities. It did pass the House. It's been over in the Senate. They attempted to push this through today, as I mentioned, as the nation was distracted and still in shock from Monday's decision, turning science on its head by redefining the word the word sex. So what was attempted today? What was the process?
Yeah, so Tony, the Equality Act, which we've been keeping an eye on because, frankly, we should really be calling this the Inequality Act or some other name for the bill because, as Senator Lee has noted the other day, it's not about equality. It perpetuates inequality, violations of religious freedom. It's an anti-faith, anti-freedom, anti-life bill. Anyway, this bill, though, Senate Democrats are trying to move it, capitalizing on Monday's Supreme Court decision through a process by which they would what's termed a hotline the bill, move it through a procedural mechanism, which if no senator objects, the bill would proceed to a vote. Thankfully, as you mentioned, Senator Lankford objected, blocked the bill. He, along with Senator Lee, Senator Hawley, went down, expressed opposition, and articulated why this was a problem. A lot of the Democrats in trying to push this bill forward, there's a lot of hand-waving and emotional pleas, and that doesn't change the fact that they're trying to defy reality with this bill, trying to suppress faith, suppress religious freedom, and it was important to see the arguments on the other side and hear them from Senators Hawley, Lee, and Lankford.
Now, one of the issues that Senator Hawley mentioned here in the latter part of that soundbite was how this would gut religious freedom. Now, in Monday's 33-page opinion, there was a little bit of reference made to religious freedom, but it was basically kicking the can down the road saying, well, yeah, it'll affect it, but we'll just have to wait to see how. Well, one of the major firewalls around the exercise of religious freedom in our country over the last 2 decades has been the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. What H.R. 5 specifically does is it eliminates those protections, and that's what Senator Hawley was making reference to.
Right, he was. And Monday's decision is bad enough in its implications for religious freedom. The Equality Act would just wipe all that away. There are things that are yet to be decided that are unknowns. The Bostock decision on Monday is going to provoke years of litigation. The Equality Act will just wipe that off the table and say no more religious freedom. So, yeah, it would make things a lot worse, bad as they are right now, where, we have a big can of unknowns. And the Bostock decision paid homage to religious freedom, or tried to, with a couple mentions of it, but it failed to deal with anything religious freedom-wise. We're going to see years of litigation at all levels, with all types of challenges. This decision is going to provoke some of these conflicts in court. It's also going to spur on action at the state level and elsewhere. We're seeing action like the Senate Democrats are trying to move the Equality Act today. We're going to see action elsewhere spurred on by this decision. So these effects are going to be harmful for religious liberty, causing us to need to be more vigilant. But the Equality Act would have just wiped all that away and said no more religious freedom through a explicit gutting of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
In essence, what Monday's court decision did, that Justice Gorsuch wrote the opinion, the majority opinion, 6-3 decision, opened the door to this attack on religious freedom. But what H.R. 5 would do is basically kick the door down off the hinges. There would be no protections for religious freedom. Gorsuch opened the door for the attacks, and it's still yet to be seen what will come through that door. But this would have, just blown the door off the hinges. And that's what they were hoping to say, this is just nothing more than in keeping in line with what the court said on Monday, when in fact it is not. It is going much, much further.
They would blow that door down on religious freedom and seek to open the door to other religious freedom violations in all sorts of areas of federal law. Right now, the Title VII decision on Monday deals with employment law, employment issues. The Senate Democrats, the national level pushing the Equality Act, want to just open up the doors to religious freedom violations in every respect. And frankly, if they get their wish with the Equality Act, blow those doors down with a gutting of RFRA. So their vision is much more expansive, and they're not satisfied with Monday's decision. They're only spurred on and encouraged.
I've got another clip. I have a clip here from Senator James Lankford. As you mentioned, he is the one who objected to the fast tracking of this piece of legislation. He also spoke to the floor. This is what he had to say earlier today.
We in America have tried to work together in all of our differences for over 2 centuries to learn better how to be able to hear the rights of another one, to be able to accommodate, and to be able to find those spots where the rights collide of 2 individuals, and to be able to work it out among each other. The Equality Act does not do that. I wish it did. It changes things dramatically. Let me just give you a few examples. It reaches into high school sports and says for male and female sports that individuals with sexual orientation, gender identity can move between those. There is no standard for testosterone. There is no standard for moving through transition, surgery. There is no standard at all set on it. It opens it up for any male, biological male, to step into female sports on the high school level or in the college level or in the pro athlete level, and to be able to move into that sport. That grossly disadvantages girls in sports, but their rights are denied. We've already seen this in several states.
So, Travis, we're going to have to go to a break. We may pick this up a little bit later in the program, so stand by, and we'll continue this. But next, we're going to turn our attention to the former Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions, continuing this conversation.
So the Equality Act, look, here's what I would say. You need to inform yourself about the Equality Act. You need to look into it. You need to read from all kinds of different, you need to hear all different sides. You need to hear all different perspectives. But these are things that it's been talked about, and then they try to push it through. It gets stopped, and then they try to come back. It's not going to go away. And with, where are we headed as a society? Look, we've reached a level. You want to know where we are? We've reached a level where now what it means to be a male, what it means to be a female, there are no easy answers anymore. It's what someone identifies as, and how far do you take that? Now there's a guy I want to play on the girl basketball team. He goes out there on a girls' track team. He destroys them. He wins all the awards. Is that he gets the scholarship? Does he get the scholarship as a girl? And then he goes to college. And how does that work? So before How does I don't even know how that all works. Where does it begin? Where does it stop? Where there are, I think the brakes are out. Where are we right now? Where are we at? The brakes are out. And I don't know where we're headed. I know the one thing is that the church has to take a stand and say, no, we know where we are and we have still our responsibility. And the church has to continue its responsibility in the midst of all of this. All right. I think we'll play the next section here after they come back from their break and at least try to hear this discussion. All right, here we go.
Because it was under his leadership, the Department of Justice reversed the Obama administration in its interpretation of the word sex. This was all started by the Obama administration, of course, carried on by the court on Monday, redefining the word sex away from its biological meaning of male and female. Senator Jeff Sessions is here next. Don't go away.
As coronavirus restrictions begin to ease, many Americans are grappling with how to adapt to the changing times. The last few months have transformed how worshipers think about church and how they are fed spiritually. While many churches are conducting services through live streams, drive-in services, and other means, questions still remain. What practical steps can we take? Are current restrictions appropriate? Do these restrictions violate the Constitution or religious freedom protections? Family Research Council has a new publication discussing religious liberty issues and offering practical guidelines for how churches and houses of worship can begin to operate as our country opens back up. Visit frc.org/church-guidelines to view this resource and learn more. As always, visit frc.org/church for our full list of resources for churches in the time of coronavirus.
Masculinity in America has never been under attack the way it is today. We've reached the point where the term itself is considered toxic or offensive to many. The consistent message in our nation is that masculinity by nature is bad and is the root cause of many of the problems plaguing our society. From his experience as a military combat officer and ordained minister of the gospel, Lieutenant General William Boykin has seen and dealt with firsthand the breakdown of leadership in our nation by the lack of godly men living lives of biblical purpose. In his latest book, Man to Man, Rediscovering Masculinity in a Challenging World, he addresses the essential elements of manhood as a provider, an instructor, a defender, a battle buddy, and a chaplain, and explains how to personally develop these traits and pass them to the next generation. Get your copy today of Man to Man, wherever books are sold.
Stay informed with what's going on in our nation's capital. Make a difference in your community, and keep your friends and family up to date with Family Research Council's new and improved Stand Firm mobile app. Like never before, this new tool is bringing Christians across America together in advancing faith, family, and freedom. On the Stand Firm app, you can contact your elected officials on campaigns and policies that are important to you with the new Take Action tab. You can listen to Washington Watch with Tony Perkins live and play previous episodes on our media player while conveniently going about your day. And you can access the Washington Update, informative blogs, tweets, and critical campaigns on our main feed so you can stay up to date on local and national news. Download the Stand Firm app on your mobile browser by visiting frc.org/app. That's frc.org/app.
Tony Perkins here, and this is Washington Watch, the website, tonyperkins.com. Again, let me remind you, as we come up to the end of our fiscal year, we've got some team members standing by to take your phone call if you'd like to partner with us and ensure that this program continues. We're, as I mentioned earlier, we're bumping up against about 400 stations across the nation that every day, Monday through Friday, are able to hear Washington Watch directly from the newsmakers, unfiltered by the left-leaning media. And we have some very generous donors who put forth a $1 million challenge, and in essence, everything you give will be doubled. So if you'd like to be a part of that, give us a call, 4008, or go to TonyPerkins.com. All right, the Supreme Court decision we've been talking about all week, redefining the word sex in federal law, Title VII. Of course, we say, what's next? I mean, they're going to come back wanting to redefine it in every way possible. Of course, the Equality Act, as we were just talking about, would have done that already. And again, it's another example. The legislative body has refused to redefine the word sex to include gender identity and gender orientation, sexual orientation. And the court did it, at least in this one provisional law. This started under Barack Obama. The Attorney General, first Attorney General for Donald Trump, under his Department of Justice, they went back to the original definition of sex, the biological definition, and upheld that. And that, unfortunately, was undercut in court on Monday. Here to talk about why and where this may lead the nation is the former Attorney General of the U.S., Senator Jeff Sessions. Senator, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's always good to be with you.
All right, let me just put those two questions before you. Why did you think it was important for your Department of Justice to uphold the biological definition of male-female in the word sex?
Well, we thought it was plainly so. There's no way that anybody would reasonably contend that in 1964, when the Civil Rights Act was passed and it protected one against discrimination based on sex, that they meant anything other than biological sex. They certainly didn't mean that this was going to alter bathrooms so males could go into women's bathrooms, at least male physically, nor that nor that biological males could compete against females in athletic events. They would never have passed such a law. So it was never intended that way by any fair reading, but it bubbled up. The Obama administration took the position, along with the ABC agency, EEOC, that it did cover transgender people, whatever their sexual identity was. So when the litigation started, Obama defended that position. When I became Attorney General under President Trump, we reversed it and took the position that the statute did not mean that. The statute meant simply biological sex, and nobody would have ever imagined otherwise. It's just a very, very dangerous and frustrating decision because, Justice Alito, one of the great justices on the court, said there's only one word to call this opinion, and that's legislation.
Right.
It's not law. He said it was preposterous and that it was a brazen abuse of the court's power. So we're in this position where judges seem to feel it upon themselves to decide social policy questions that Congress has rejected. As you know, Tony, Congress, a lot of talk about changing the law to include transgender, and Congress has not done it.
Right.
They refuse to do so. So they get the courts to do that which the people's elected representatives would not do. That is not a role of the court.
And to Justice Alito's point, this is beyond the constitutional authority of the court to legislate, is it not?
I certainly believe that. Fundamentally, courts do not legislate. They take an oath, and that oath is to serve under the Constitution and the laws of the United States, under them. They're not above them. Their oath is to serve the law as it is, not as they might wish it to be. And I remember, Tony, I'll just share this little anecdote. Justice Roberts, when he came around to be up for the Supreme Court, and we talked in my office, I was a member of the Judiciary Committee, and maybe it was me, I'm not sure, but we discussed a neutral umpire, that a judge was an umpire and couldn't take sides in the game, and that was probably later when he testified, he used that phrase. He says a judge is a neutral umpire, calls balls and strikes, does not take sides in the game. And so I remember that. I don't think he honored that.
As the top law enforcement official, as the Attorney General of the United States, upholding the laws of this country, I mean, we saw this under the Obama administration. We began to see this lawlessness. The Attorney General under him held in contempt of Congress for not providing information to Congress. We've seen this lawlessness break forth. Let me ask you this question, Senator. When the court goes beyond its constitutional authority, isn't that also a form of lawlessness?
Well, it is. It absolutely is. And good and dutiful Americans, good people, church-going, good, decent people, try to do the right thing, can't, acknowledge, well, we'll accept the rule of the courts. And I have, accepted opinions I vehemently disagree with. But I tell you, these two cases, today and yesterday, have made me rethink it. I cannot have the same degree of respect for the courts as I used to have, and I think the court is on a dangerous path. If it loses the confidence of the American people, the rule of law is in danger.
Senator Sessions,
Now, I don't know if we're headed there. I don't know if we are headed to an area where people don't respect the courts. I know this. The courts have become politicized, and now it seems like every side wants the court to give the ruling that they want, and if they don't, then they're not going to accept it, and that's dangerous. I don't know where all this goes, but you've got the court making its ruling. And again, I already went into a long discussion about that in a previous episode, that I don't want people to be discriminated against. But if it starts changing the fundamental way in which we understand, like that's a male, that's a female, the country is going to have to define that legally. That's going to have to be defined. What is a male? What is a female? And if it's just what you identify as, and now there's not even a scientific definition or not even a genetic makeup of that, how far does that, where does that go? He didn't ever really answer the question. Where does this all lead to? I don't know. I think it's leading to I don't know if a lawless situation, but a relativistic situation where right, wrong, up, down, left, right, there's going to be no definitions, which will lead to some level of chaos. And I'll just end this episode with this. Currently, right now, a poll came out that the 83% of Americans are very stressed over the nation's future. 83%. Now, I don't know if that is how accurate that is. I don't know how stressed people are, but I know this. The country is fundamentally changing right before our very eyes. We have all kinds of things to be concerned about. I don't know what's going to happen in the election. I have a hard time believing Trump is going to get reelected. I have a hard time believing that. We have a lot of crazy things happening around the world. Here's what we know as Christians. Our focus has to be on the Great Commission, has to be on the Word of God, but we need to stop every once in a while and look at where we are and then try to figure out where we are going. I don't know where the country is going right now, but we're going to try in future episodes to stop and do. I mean, this is not a great example of what we're going to be doing, but we're going to listen to we're going to try to cover a lot of different topics at one time, not necessarily going too in depth with each one, just trying to give you a sample. That's not a big sample today. We talked a little bit about Turkey. They mentioned the Trump rally. I give you my own take on that. And then a little bit more discussion about the court's decision, the Equality Act. And these are all things you need to be aware of. I'll try to make this idea work a little bit better. It's just I need the ability to be able to cover a number of topics. And so, where we are, where are we? I think where we are is a way of trying to do that. So I'm going to shape it hopefully a little bit better, and hopefully this will be something that will benefit you, just to be able to hear a lot of things that are happening, maybe things that you're not aware of, and well, we'll see. I've got some ideas on how to shape this, but this was the first attempt to do it. Not completely happy with episode 1, but we will see. We're not going to create a separate podcast for this. This will be a part of Theology Central, but it'll be, hey, in Theology Central, we're going to stop and try to figure out where we are as a culture, as a society, and then we'll, of course, look at things from a theological perspective. So there you have it. I'll stop right there. You can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening. God bless.